Hi, Jessica Nadav, bringing you this week's Davar Torah for Parashat Va-etchanan. As usual, I'm going to dedicate this Davar Torah for the refuah shalema of my mother, Simcha Violeta bat Miriam, Eric Yitzchak ben Miriam, Chava Freidel bat Edita Malka, Magni Esther bat Clara, Harav Shimon ben Sarah, and Shemuel Yosef ben Rachel, and of course in the merit of all our soldiers who are keeping us safe in Israel. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should protect them all. However, this week I would like to also dedicate this Davar Torah, especially for my late father, Tzvi ben Dov, my father, my teacher, whose Nachala or Yotzeit is Thursday night, Friday, following the fast, following the 9th of Av, so the 10th of Av. Now, I'm very proud to call myself my father's daughter, and I can only pray I could live up to his standards. My father, Tzvi ben Dov Weisvogel alav shalom, was a man of great wisdom and learning. And during his lifetime, I barely had to ask a question of anybody because I knew he could find the answer for me or know it. He was a man of wise counsel. In fact, I chose my profession based on his advice. And it was only after he had gone that I realized how much I relied on him in this respect. Now, most people remember him as a sweet, humble man who never had a bad word to say about anyone, always with a twinkle in his eye, always had a smile and a joke. And a kind word at the ready, always. He gave every person the benefit of the doubt and never passed judgment on people. He always sought peace between people, although he never had a problem standing up for injustice either. One of the crucial times of the week for my father, alav shalom, was Erev Shabbat, Friday. He would start getting ready for Shabbat hours before Shabbat was due in. And at lunchtime, he'd start polishing his shoes when he came home from work. In fact, we had a standing joke in the family. We wouldn't ask him what time Shabbat is. We'd say, Daddy, what time is panic stations? Because he'd always give us a time for Shabbat, and then he'd give us a time 2 hours or 3 hours before, saying panic stations start at. He passed away, actually, like on a year like this year, where the fast of Av was on a Thursday, and my father passed away on the Friday. 26 years ago, on the 10th of Av. And he passed away very close to the time for Shabbat. It was August in Gibraltar. And as a result, like in the UK, Shabbat would be brought forward to an earlier, more convenient time, rather than being brought in with sunset. But nonetheless, it was proposed that the funeral would take place on Erev Shabbat, on the Friday before Shabbat. So the rabbi of the community moved the time for Shabbat to 18 minutes before sunset, so made Shabbat to start later. And the Chevra Kadisha rushed to preparing for his burial. When my father was ready, my dear mum, God bless her and keep her safe, Ad Me'av Esrim, for 120 years, and my sisters and I left the flat and waited in the foyer of the building. And I recall looking up and seeing all the men and boys of our community, because women don't go to funerals in the Sephardi world, but all the boys and the men who'd come to accompany my father on his last journey, which by the way is a great mitzvah. I'll never forget seeing that every single boy and man were immaculately dressed for Shabbat, and that's no small feat in an hot August day in Gibraltar, where people live in shorts and t-shirts. People don't go to funerals in a suit in August, but this time they did. But why? Because it was Shabbat. And I remember seeing all the little boys with their hair kind of plastered from their showers, all looking immaculate in their suits and ties and hair plastered. And they were ready for Shabbat because from there they were going directly to Friday night services in Shul. There was no time for anything else. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, they're going to bury my beloved father to whom Shabbat was so important and who got ready for Shabbat so far in advance. They're going to take him to his last journey immaculately dressed and ready for Shabbat, 100%. And I looked to one of my sisters and I said to her, Daddy is smiling. Daddy is smiling. He's looking at this, and for once he got an entire community ready for Shabbat completely on time. No one would be late that week. Nobody would be late. Because Shabbat had actually been moved. The entire community was ready with plenty of time to spare. And every Friday night, when I light my candles, I remember this event. So it gave me immense comfort that he'd passed away on a Friday where his soul was going straight into rest on Shabbat, into a state of rest, that he'd passed away just going into Shabbat Nachamu. Nachamu is a Shabbat of comfort. We take comfort from having come out of Tisha B'Av, of the saddest day of the Jewish year. The first Shabbat is called Shabbat Nachamu, the Shabbat of comfort. So this is, he died on the eve of the Shabbat of comfort, of our sorrows, which also gave me a lot of comfort. Now, the Hebrew writer Achad Ha'am said that more than the Jewish people kept Shabbat, Shabbat kept the Jewish people. And indeed, in the 1990s, for many years, on the New York Times, there was a little advert that went out stating what time candlelighting was in New York that week. Now, it stopped after the sponsor ended, and it didn't run again, but it ran one more time. It ran on the 1st of January 2000. The New York Times ran a special edition of the paper, and they had 3 front pages. On the first one was the news from the 1st of January 1900. On the second one was the news of that day, of the days of that the actual news of the day. And the third one, on the third front page, it showed the predicted future events of the 1st of January 2100. And on the bottom of that third one, on the 1st of January 2100, appeared the candlelighting time for that day, for the 1st of January 2100. No one paid for it. It wasn't a paid ad. It was a fictional advertisement, but it was put there by the New York Times. And when the production manager, an Irish Catholic, was asked why he put that in, he said, "We don't know what will happen in the year 2100. It is impossible to predict the future. But one thing we can be certain, that in the year 2100, the Jewish women will be lighting Shabbat candles." That is the centrality of Shabbat to the Jewish calendar and the Jewish home. Now, the last time my father had gone to shul, had gone to synagogue, was Shavuot. He desperately wanted to go and hear the 10 Commandments. He wasn't well enough, but he insisted on going. And as he walked into the synagogue, the congregation rushed up to give him the highest honor of being called up to the Torah, to get a calling up, an aliyah, for the reading of the 10 Commandments. My father was embarrassed by this honor. He wanted the rabbi to do it, but the community insisted, the congregation insisted, and my father was called up. And I watched in great pride how my father, when he walked up to the Tevat, the Bima, the whole congregation stood up as the 10 Commandments were read. But why was it not sufficient for my father, alav hashalom, to have read the 10 Commandments at home? He wasn't feeling well. He could have just read them at home. Why did he need to push himself to hear them in synagogue? And my guess is, I don't know this for sure, but my guess is that he understood something very deeply that we learn also in this week's parasha. In this week's parasha, we read the Shema. The Shema is a very crucial prayer in Judaism. Most people know the Shema. The Shema is something we recite twice daily, and most people know it. The word Shema means to hear. What's so important about hearing? Surely seeing is believing. Seeing is the ultimate, isn't it? And yet here we are with a fundamental tenet of Judaism about listening or hearing. In fact, more than that, I'm going to go further. And I'm going to say when the Torah was given at Sinai, we're told in the Parashat Vayitro in Exodus, we're told that what was the Jewish the experience of Bnei Israel when they received the Torah. We're told Ro'im et hakolot, they saw the noise, they saw the voices, they saw the noises and the voices, the sounds. How's that even possible? How can you see sound? They saw sound somehow. And moreover, when we look at our Torah, we know that our laws are transmitted orally. The laws of the Torah are governed by our oral law, by the Talmud. And it's in its argumentation, which is plenty, believe me, the Talmud says, Tashema, meaning come listen. We're being taught something very fundamental about Judaism. When we see something, we can look at it detached, almost as it were through a screen. We don't need to be involved in it. But when the Talmud says, Tashema, come listen, it's telling us something more. It's telling us, involve yourself, engage, participate, have a relationship with it. Don't be a spectator, be a participant. Listening is at the heart of any relationship. We must have a relationship with God and His Torah. And for that, we need to switch on our listening ears. Crowds are moved by great speakers, but lives are changed by great listeners. My father, alav shalom, understood this very deeply. That in order to have a relationship that's important, you need to listen. Hakadosh Baruch Hu was important to him, and he went and he listened. Shabbat shalom.